Miami Heat begin their postseason on Wednesday night in the play-in against the Chicago Bulls. But before we get to that game, we do have some NBA draft news and rumors to discuss surrounding the Miami Heat with an update on the Golden State Warriors pick. And plus, are the Heat targeting Oklahoma point guard Jeremiah Fears? We'll discuss all of that on today's show. I'm Nic Rohloff. This is the Heat Report by Chat Sports. But make sure you do subscribe and join us on Wednesday evening for the play-in game between Miami and Chicago. We'll be live 30 minutes before projected tip-off, so 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 p.m. Central Time, or 6:30 Central Time. And this is the thumbnail, so if you see it, hit that sub button and join us for the live show. All right, let's start with the Warriors pick here because they do play on Tuesday evening against the Memphis Grizzlies in the 7-8 play-in game. And the Heat got relatively lucky that Golden State ultimately faltered in the final week and a half of the season and went from what looked like to be a 6-seed lock, potentially even a 5-seed in the West, to falling all the way into the play-in to get that 7-seed. And if you are a Miami Heat fan, you are obviously rooting for the Golden State Warriors to lose. Listen, I know some people might want to see Jimmy Butler succeed, but the truth is the Heat could very much use a second lottery pick. And although it is very unlikely that the Warriors lose to the Grizzlies and then to the winner of Mavericks Kings, just because I think Golden State is significantly better than both of those two teams, referring to Sacramento and Dallas, you never know. In a one-game situation, maybe DeRozan and Zach LaVine were to go off if the Warriors lost to the Grizzlies, because the Heat keep the pick that Golden State is sending them as long as it is not inside the top 10, and it's from anywhere 11 to 30. So hypothetically, if the Warriors lost both of the play-in games, they would fall into the lottery at the 14th overall spot, and assuming they didn't get the under 1% chance of moving inside of the number one pick and under 3% chance to get into the top four, well, the Heat would then potentially have two lottery picks if Miami did not make the postseason themselves. So let's just project that the Warriors do what they probably will do and make the playoffs. Well, this is where things currently stand, actually. There is a tie for the 18th best record, worst record? I don't know how that works. I guess worst record is the way you would say that. Between them, Memphis, and Milwaukee. So those three teams all actually have traded their picks to the Heat, Wizards, and Brooklyn Nets. So there's a tie record-wise. And unlike in the NFL, where they go through a series of tiebreakers to determine head-to-head record, conference record, blah, 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 to see who ultimately has the higher draft pick, they actually do a drawing. And they will draw to see who gets the 18th pick, the 19th pick, and the 20th pick between these three teams. And the difference to me between 18 and 20 is absolutely massive. I know it's only two spots potentially, and you could get the 19th pick and be in the middle of the three, which I wouldn't be that upset with. I would be kind of upset if the Heat lost that drawing and ultimately were picking 20 when the Wizards and Nets get the 18th and 19th pick. That would be a bummer. But to me, this is such a solid draft class. It is a little bit top-heavy, and you can get into some severe question marks around the depth of this draft class once you get past the lottery to like 16, 17, 18. But that's why I think it's a good thing that Miami should desperately be wanting the 18th pick, because if they get the 18th pick, there's a better chance of them being able to get a really good player than if they traded number 20, or if you could wanted the package potentially 11 and 18 to move up in the draft. That's also a possibility as well. But predict it for me. With the Warriors pick, they could probably get 14, 18, 19, or 20. Those are like the four options Miami could have if they get the pick this season. Predict it for me. Which pick will the Heat get? Get down in the comment section and let me know. I did want to make sure you guys knew this as well, is that I mentioned there will be a drawing for the 18th, 19th, 20th pick from Golden State, assuming they make the playoffs. That drawing will come next week. Once the playoff field is finalized, we know who is a lottery team. We know who is actually in the playoffs field. That is when they will draw it, because there's no point of doing the drawing if the Warriors miss the playoffs, and then they're obviously in the lottery. So according to a person around the NBA, that drawing will occur next week, and we'll ultimately find out, assuming the Warriors in the playoffs, if the Heat get the 18th, 19th, or 20th pick. So I did want to do a little quick thought experiment of looking at some of the prospects on my board that I expect will be available and the Heat could target in the 18th, 19th, and 20th pick range. Now, Rasheer Fleming would be my top guy in this range, the forward from St. Joe's, but he might ultimately rise up to potentially be a late lottery pick or just outside the lottery. A 6'9" wing with a 7'4" wingspan, shot over 40% from three. He would 1,000% be my top guy out of these 10 prospects. Now, the rest of these guys aren't ranked in any specific order. I could just confidently say Rasheer Fleming would be my top guy. Some intriguing names here include Nick Clifford, the guard/forward from Colorado State, who does it all. Another guy that's interesting is obviously Walter Clayton Jr., the guard from Florida. I would be intrigued to see if Miami would be interested in him, an undersized but good scoring guard that maybe projects as a Peyton Pritchard type player at the next level. But I think you also have to take a look at some center options, because if Miami went with a guard or wing with the first pick, there is a chance with Bam Adebayo transitioning to the 4/wing position, then center, that Miami needs a backup center to Kel'el Ware next year. Danny Wolf and Thomas Sorber are two intriguing collegiate options. And that's kind of where I want to briefly end this conversation with the second Heat draft pick. Assuming the Miami Heat keep that selection and don't ultimately use it in a trade for, let's say, a Ja Morant, Trae Young, or Kevin Durant, and they make two picks in the 2025 NBA draft if they keep the first pick and don't make the playoffs, I think the second pick is very much dependent on what happens with the first pick. If the Heat keep the 11th pick and go with a wing or a big man, like a Derek Queen or Kaman Malawach who fell, I wouldn't want that to happen. But let's say Pat Riley does that to get a backup for Kel'el Ware. Well, then that second pick will likely be used on a guard. And you look at a Walter Clayton, a LeBaron Philon from Alabama, something like that. A Tahad Pettiford, if you really like him, or a Cam Jones as well. But if the Heat go with a guard with their first pick, like an Agor Demen, like a Jeremiah Fears, who we'll touch on here in just a second, then you probably go wing or big man with the second first-round pick. So to me, everything will be very fluid and up in the air. You'll have to see how the board falls in late June, assuming you keep those two first picks. All right, coming up in just a second, we are going to talk about the aforementioned Jeremiah Fears, the point guard from Oklahoma. Are the Heat going to target him in the NBA draft, assuming they keep that lottery pick? We'll discuss him as a prospect here in a second, but we are sponsored by GameTime, the official ticketing partner of the Heat Report by Chat Sports. And if you want to go see a live event, GameTime is the easiest way to buy those tickets. Get it faster, easier. Even for hard-to-get NBA playoff seats, prices on the GameTime app actually may go down closer to tip-off. They have last-minute deals. Save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, doesn't matter. They have all-in pricing. When you toggle that feature, it shows you the total price of your ticket up front with no surprise fees at checkouts, and they have the lowest price guaranteed. If you find a ticket at a different service that is a lower price point in the same exact seat, same exact section, same exact row, GameTime will credit you 110% of the difference. Get started today. The Heat might not have an NBA playoff game at home this year if they lose in the play-in, but if you're in Miami in that local area, go see Chris Brown, go see Lady Gaga, who are coming to the area this summer. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code CHATSPORTS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CHATSPORTS for $20 off. Download the GameTime app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, let's talk about drafting the guard from Oklahoma, Jeremiah Fears, because Yahoo Sports Kevin O'Connor, an NBA draft analyst, formerly of The Ringer, had the Heat drafting Fears with the 11th pick, where the Heat are obviously slated to select right now, assuming they lose in the lottery. I have talked about Jeremiah Fears a couple times on the channel. I am very much fond of him as a prospect, and I would love for him to be in a Miami Heat uniform. But let's see what Kevin O'Connor said on Fears' fit to Miami. He said that Tyler Hero became an all-star this season, showing his ability as a combo guard, but he needs a backcourt partner. Fears is a dynamic guard with a twitchy attacking style and a knack for coming in as a clutch shooter. He's one of college basketball's youngest freshmen, and it showed with his shaky decision-making as a shooter and passer, but he has a feel for shot creation and a handle that lets him get anywhere on the floor. so he may only need time to emerge as a star in Miami's system. If the Heat ended up drafting Jeremiah Fears in the first round, I would be doing cartwheels. I would be doing jumping backs. Hey, you might see me go tarps off during our NBA draft stream. That's how much I like Fears and think he could be a all-star, all-NBA level guard in the NBA for the Miami Heat. I mean, you mentioned how young he is. He is the second youngest player coming out of college for this NBA draft class, only trailing, of course, the number one pick, Cooper Flagg. Fears was excellent. He was not someone projected to be a first-round pick. Hell, he wasn't even projected to be a one-and-done player for Porter Moser in Oklahoma. But he was just that damn good last year for the Sooners, averaging 17.1 points per game, shooting 43% from the field. There is question marks about his ability to shoot from beyond the arc, but I think those question marks really aren't as loud as you would think based off the shooting percentage. I'll tell you why here in just a second. But he gets his hands dirty in the rebounding game as well. Averaged a good assist, good pick and roll playmaker. Decision making is a little bit of a question, but that can be coached and that can be corrected. But the raw tools and traits of Jeremiah Fears are just too good to pass up on. So make the call for me. Would you draft the Oklahoma point guard in the lottery? Type D if you would draft them. Type P if you would pass. Let me know in the comment section. Let's look at his measurables here because I mentioned his age. He is going to be 18 years old when you draft him, 18.7 years. I mentioned Cooper Flagg as the youngest prospect. He is 18 and a half years of age. His height and wingspan, that might be one of the rare negatives with him. He's 6'4", which is good height for a guard. The negative wingspan, or let's just say equal wingspan, is a little bit of a concern. And he does have a light frame, only 182 pounds, which is one of his negatives. When you look at his scouting profile right now, the three things that are poor with Fears is that he has that high turnover rate, but he also had a very high usage rate. He was being used 31% of the time for Oklahoma. You just don't see 18-year-old freshmen come in and have that high of a usage rate. Even the unbelievable five stars like Cooper Flagg and Dylan Harper, their usage rate isn't that high. The small frame is certainly a concern and a knock on him, but if he's able to improve his strength, then you will see him have a much better frame. And he did struggle from beyond the arc, right? Shot 28% from three. That's not ideal. But the positives with him outweigh the negatives in a large way. He's twitchy, like Kevin O'Connor mentioned. His handle is elite. He has excellent change of speed. He can speed you up and drive by you. He can also decelerate and get into that little 8-foot floater inside the paint, which is another thing that is very good about Jeremiah Fears. He is an excellent finisher, whether it's with his left hand, his right hand, amongst the trees, up and unders, little floaters. He is a great finisher inside. But I also think that shooting concern isn't that big of a concern because he shot 85% from the free throw line this past year. And to me, if you are a good free throw shooter at the college level, you should be able to develop an above average three-point shot because he clearly has good shooting mechanics. He just has been inconsistent at the three-point arc, which could be because of his light frame, not as good in terms of strength. But I believe he is going to be a good three-point shooter in the NBA with NBA spacing as well because he's a good mid-range shooter and a good free throw shooter. But another reason why I really love Jeremiah Fears is something that you might say is an intangible, and it's his mental makeup. He's clutch. He's a big-time player. We showed his statistics over the course of the season for Oklahoma, but how about Jeremiah Fears' postseason stats? The two games that Oklahoma played in the SEC tournament and the one game that they played in the NCAA tournament where they unfortunately lost to UConn in the 8-9 game before UConn played Florida in the second round. Fears in those three games of the SEC and NCAA tournament went nuclear, 25.5 points per game. And he improved as a three-point shooter, shooting 38%, going 4 of 7 one game, 2 of 3 of another game. He played extremely well, had 29 and 28 points in the two SEC tournament games, respectively. So to me, yeah, he had some shooting concerns and inefficiency concerns during the regular season, but when the defense is tightened up, win or go home games, he balled out. He's dynamic. and to me would just be an absolute no-brain pick for the Heat. Now, with all of the positives I have mentioned revolving Jeremiah Fears and how I would be ecstatic if the Heat got him in the lottery, sadly, I don't think he makes it out of the top 10. That's how good he is. I think he goes in the first 10 selections, which means Miami would ultimately have to move up in the lottery. Their pick selection, if they lost in the play-in, would be either 1, 2, 3, 4, 11, or 12. Those are the only 5 options based off the lottery ping pong balls and how it's set up. But like I mentioned and alluded to a little bit earlier, the Heat could technically package pick 11, pick 18, 19, or 20, take those 2 picks, and move up to pick 7, pick 6, pick 8 on NBA draft night to draft a guy like Jeremiah Fears if they really liked him. And I would not rule that out as something that I would like to do because that's how much I believe in Jeremiah Fears' potential at the next level and how big of a need point guard is for the Miami Heat. Something to think about. And we'll be here all off season long as well as during the NBA play-in when Heat take on the Bulls in Chicago on Wednesday night. Hit that sub button for daily content surrounding Miami and watch parties for these play-in games. So join us today.